I never thought a simple text message could make my hands tremble like that. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it just family. Those cold words came from my son, the same son I'd given a house to just months ago. As the storm raged outside, I realized the storm inside me was far worse, and the people I loved most had left me alone to face it. My name is Evelyn, and I've spent 74 years learning to keep my voice soft, to keep the peace, to swallow the hurt with a smile so my family wouldn't feel uncomfortable around me. I was the mother who stayed up late sewing patches on torn jeans, who quietly skipped meals when money was tight so David could have enough. I was the grandmother who made cookies from scratch for Elijah, who saved every little drawing he made. Me, folding them carefully into a box I kept under my bed. That night, the wind howled around the corners of this old house I have lived in for nearly half my life. The rain slammed against the windows so hard it sounded like it was trying to come inside. I had lit candles in the kitchen because the power flickered, threatening to leave me in darkness, and the sweet scent of cinnamon and warm peaches filled the room as the cobbler cooled on the counter. I had made it for Elijah, my grandson, because he loved it. He'd always pull at my apron, asking when it would be ready, eyes bright, cheeks flushed with the joy only a child can have for something as simple as dessert with grandma. But there was no little hand tugging at my apron that night. There was no excited chatter about the rain or the sound of muddy boots stomping at the door. Instead, there was a message, cold and final. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it just family. It took me a moment to understand. I read it twice, 3 times, my finger trembling as I scrolled up, trying to make sense of the words, just family. As if I wasn't family. As if the years I spent raising David alone after his father died meant nothing. As if the holidays I saved and scraped for, the birthdays I never missed, the tears I dried, the laughter we shared. As if all of that had disappeared because Bethany, my daughter-in-law, decided it was inconvenient for me to be there. I pressed my palm against the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the storm, waiting for their car to turn into the driveway even though I knew it wouldn't. The house smelled of cinnamon and felt like sorrow. I sank into the chair by the window, pulling my shawl around my shoulders as the storm rattled the glass. Every rumble of thunder reminded me of the echo in my chest. A hollow ache that whispered, "You are alone now, Evelyn." I thought about all I had given them over the years. When David and Bethany wanted to move into a bigger house because Elijah needed a backyard, I offered them the money I had saved, quietly cashing in the small retirement fund I'd planned to use for roof repairs and medical bills I knew would come someday. When Bethany said she needed a new car for work, I co-signed the loan, even though the banker looked at me with pity as he slid the papers across the desk. I told myself that family helps family, but in that moment, in the glow of candlelight that flickered against the rain-streaked windows, I wondered what family meant to them. I stood, the ache in my knees reminding me that age was a slow thief, and walked to the kitchen. I looked at the cobbler, still warm, the scent wrapping around me like a memory I didn't want to let go of. I thought about Elijah's little hands, sticky with peach syrup, his giggle as I wiped his chin, and then the tears came. I sank to the floor, letting the sobs shake through me, letting the grief of years of quiet sacrifice and unspoken disappointments pour out into that empty room. The thunder roared outside, but it was quiet compared to the storm inside my heart. Why, David? Why would you let her shut me out like this? After everything I gave, after everything I did to keep you safe, to keep you fed, to give you a chance when I had nothing left to give. The storm raged on as I cried, and when the tears dried and the silence came back, it was different. It was heavier but clearer. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just feeling hurt, I was feeling angry. The next morning, the storm had passed, but puddles still reflected the gray sky and branches littered the street like broken promises. I wrapped the cobbler carefully, placed it in the fridge, and wiped the counters clean. The house felt empty, but I moved slowly, deliberately, holding on to the quiet strength that was starting to grow in me. Like a stubborn weed pushing through cracked concrete, I went to my bedroom and pulled out the shoebox under my bed. The one where I kept old bills, receipts, and the papers from the loan I co-signed, the down payment I gave them, and the small notes where David had written, "Thanks, Mom, I'll pay you back soon." I sat on the bed and opened the box, looking at the neat stacks of paper, the record of every time I had said yes to them, every time I had given up a piece of myself so they could have more. It was all there, and as I flipped through them I realized something. They don't see this. They don't see me. They see the convenience. They see the help. They see the cobbler, the babysitting, the extra money when times were tight. But they don't see the woman who built this small life out of nothing, who kept giving and giving until there was barely anything left for herself. I closed the box and held it to my chest, breathing. deeply, letting the truth settle in. I needed to protect what I had left. I needed to find a way to stand up, not with anger that would burn me out, but with quiet strength that would remind them that I was still here, and I would not be used and discarded. That afternoon, I called my oldest friend Martha, who lived 2 streets over. Her voice was warm, the kind that felt like a blanket on a cold day. "Evelyn, is everything all right?" she asked, hearing the shake in my breath. "No," I said, my voice small but clear. "No, it's not. I think I need help." "What happened, I think?" I swallowed, the words tasting strange on my tongue. "I think they're taking advantage of me, Martha. I think they've forgotten that I'm a person too." There was a pause, and then her voice, steady and strong. "Come over for tea. We'll figure it out." I dressed carefully, putting on my warmest sweater. The one Elijah had said was fluffy like a cloud, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the world washed clean by the storm, but inside me, the storm had left something new. Resolve. I walked slowly to Martha's house, each step feeling like a promise to myself. I would not be invisible anymore. I would not be pushed aside because it was convenient for them. When Martha opened the door, she pulled me into a hug that made me realize just how long it had been since someone held me without expecting anything. In return, we sat at her kitchen table, the scent of peppermint tea filling the air, and I opened the shoebox between us. "I need to protect myself," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "And you will," Martha replied, squeezing my hand. "We'll call my lawyer tomorrow. You have rights, Evelyn. It's time you remembered that." That night I walked home under a sky that was finally clear, the stars blinking down at me like tiny witnesses to the promise I had made. No more waiting by the window, Evelyn. No more begging for scraps of love from people who don't see your worth. You are not invisible, you are not disposable. You are enough. I stood by the window once more, looking out at the quiet street, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet peace settle in, because I knew the storm was over. And I was still standing. I woke up the next morning to the soft glow of dawn spilling through the curtains. It was quiet. That kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my feet find the cold floor, reminding myself that I was still here, still breathing, still me. The shoebox was still on the table by the door, waiting for me like a silent promise I had made to myself. "Today, Evelyn," I whispered, "you take the first real step." I made myself tea and watched the steam rise, curling in the morning light like the prayers I had whispered over so many years. Prayers for David to find happiness, for Elijah to grow strong, and kind for Bethany to find peace within herself so she could be gentle with the people around her. But as I sipped the tea, letting its warmth settle into my bones, I realized it was time to start praying for myself. Martha came by mid-morning, wearing her bright yellow scarf, the one her daughter had given her last Christmas. She brought a notebook and a pen, and when she stepped into my kitchen, she smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Ready?" she asked, placing her hand on mine. I nodded, clutching the shoebox. "I think so." She drove us to the small law office in town, the one above the bakery that still smelled like cinnamon bread, even on the stairwell. I had never been there before, never thought I would need to. For so long, I believed that family took care of family, that there was no need for paperwork or lawyers, that love was enough. But love, I was learning, could be twisted by people who forgot what it truly meant. The lawyer, Mr. Henson, was a kind-faced man in his late 50s, with silver hair and gentle eyes that made it easier to talk. He offered us coffee, but my hands were shaking too much, so I wrapped them around the strap of my purse instead. "How can I help you, Mrs. Carter?" he asked. I opened the shoebox, pulling out the neatly stacked papers, the old receipts, the notes David had written me, the bank documents showing the transfers I had made, the co-signed loan papers with my signature next to Bethany's, all the pieces of me that I had given away without a second thought. "I need to know what my rights are," I said, my voice small but clear. "I've helped them so much, and now they don't even want me around. They don't answer my calls, they don't let me see my grandson, and I feel like they're just waiting for me to be gone." Martha squeezed my hand, grounding me. Mr. Henson took the papers gently, laying them out in front of him, sorting them with the care of a man who knew that what he held was not just paper, but a lifetime of sacrifice. As he flipped through the documents, I watched his face, searching for clues in the small furrow of his brow, the way he tapped his pen against the desk. Finally he looked up. "Double quotes, Mrs. Carter. You've given them a lot over the years. Some of these were loans, correct?" I nodded. "David always said he would pay me back when things got better. Did you ever sign any agreements stating these were gifts?" "No," I said softly, remembering how David would hug me and say, "You're the best mom." And I would smile, telling him it was nothing. "It matters. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Henson said gently. Legally, these are loans unless stated. Otherwise, you have documentation showing the amounts and dates that gives you leverage. Leverage. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like something sharp and heavy. What does that mean, Mr. Henson? It means you can protect yourself. Now, if you wish, we can send a letter requesting repayment or mediation. We can also ensure your remaining finances are secure so you aren't taken advantage of further. I sat back, letting the words settle around me like the quiet after a storm. Was I ready for this? To stand up to my own son, to risk the already fragile bond we had, to tell him that I was done being silent? As I stared at the papers, I remembered the coldness in his message, the way Bethany looked through me when I visited, how she would whisper to David while I sat with Elijah, pretending not to hear. I remembered the missed calls, the unanswered texts, the birthdays spent alone, and then I remembered Elijah's little arms around my neck, the way he would light up when he saw me, how he would whisper, "I love you, Grandma," before falling asleep during our movie nights. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing this because I needed to survive. And I needed him to know that I was a person, not just a wallet with a heartbeat. I want to do it, I said finally, my voice steady. I want them to know that I see what they're doing and I won't be silent anymore. Martha squeezed my hand again, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, Evelyn. Mr. Henson nodded. I will draft a letter outlining the amounts, requesting a meeting to discuss repayment and future boundaries. Boundaries, I repeated softly. A word I had never allowed myself before. That afternoon, I walked back into my home, the shoebox lighter now, its secrets shared. I sat in my chair by the window, looking out at the street where children played. In puddles, their laughter echoing, and for the first time, I felt a sense of calm. I wasn't weak for asking for what I was owed. I wasn't cruel for wanting to protect what was left of my life. As the sun set, I made myself a small dinner, humming softly as I moved around the kitchen. I looked at the empty chair across from me and whispered, I'm sorry, David, but I can't let you hurt me anymore. It detailed the amounts, the dates, and the request for a discussion. It gave them 2 weeks to respond. The silence that followed was heavy. My phone didn't ring, and I didn't text. I went about my days watering the plants, baking small batches of cookies, walking to Martha's for tea, sitting on the porch in the evenings to watch the stars blink into the sky, and then, one evening, as I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, my phone buzzed. It was David. Mom, what is this letter? Bethany is furious. Why would you do this to us? I read the message twice, the familiar guilt rising in my chest, the old urge to apologize, to make it right, but I DI'd in single quotes T. instead. I typed back, we need to talk in person, David. This isn't something I will discuss over text. He didn't respond immediately, and I placed the phone on the table, taking a slow, steady breath. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering all the nights I had lain awake, worrying about bills, about David's schooling, about how I would make Christmas special even when there was no money, and I realized that for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't afraid of standing up for myself. I wasn't afraid of losing people who only loved me when I was useful. I fell asleep that night with a calm I hadn't known in years, knowing that whatever came next, I would face it with the quiet, steady strength that had carried me through every storm in my life, because I was no longer waiting by the window for someone to remember me. I was remembering myself when David finally called. It was late on a Thursday, the kind of quiet night where the hum of the refrigerator feels louder than your own breathing. I let it ring once, twice, before answering, letting him wait. Just a small act, but it felt like reclaiming something, Mom. He started, his voice sharp, tired, like a man carrying burdens he didn't want to name. We need to talk. Yes, I said, calm, clear. We do. There was a pause. Bethany thinks you're overreacting. She says you're trying to punish us. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. This isn't about punishment, David. This is about respect. He sighed, the sound crackling through the phone. Can we come by tomorrow night? I looked around the small living room at the photos of Elijah on the bookshelf, at the blanket I had knitted draped over the arm of the couch, at the empty chair where David used to sit, laughing as a child. Yes, tomorrow night is fine. The next day felt long, each hour stretching as I cleaned the house, not because I needed to impress them, but because I wanted to prepare my space for what was coming. I brewed chamomile tea and set it on the table. I placed the shoebox in the center, its lid open, papers neatly arranged like soldiers ready for inspection. I sat down and waited when the knock finally came. It was soft, hesitant. I opened the door, and there stood David, hands in his pockets, eyes downcast. Behind him, Bethany stood stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes scanning my living room as if looking for something to criticize. Elijah wanted to come, David said, but Bethany thought it was best if he stayed home. I nodded, stepping aside. Come in. They sat across from me, the small table between us feeling like a wall. Bethany crossed her arms, looking anywhere but at me, while David shifted uncomfortably, his knee bouncing. I read the letter, David said finally, his voice tight. Mom, why would you do this? I took a breath, letting the quiet settle before I spoke. Because I needed to protect myself, David. Bethany scoffed. Protect yourself from your own family. I turned to her, steady. From being used, Bethany. From being forgotten until you need something. From being treated like a bank you can withdraw from, whenever it suits you. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. David rubbed his forehead, and I saw the boy I used to know. The one who would run to me with scraped knees, crying until I kissed them better. Mom, we're struggling, he finally said, his voice breaking. Bethany's hours got cut, and we're trying to keep up with the mortgage. We didn't want to ask you again because we knew it wasn't fair. Bethany shot him a look. Sharp, but he didn't see it. It's not just about the money, I said softly. It's about how you've made me feel invisible. How you've let Bethany push me away from Elijah. How you've let her speak for you. Deciding when I'm allowed to see him, when I'm allowed to be part of your life. Bethany's eyes flashed. We have our own family now, Evelyn. We need boundaries, boundaries. I repeated, my voice calm. You mean the kind that allow you to take from me when it's convenient, but shut me out when it isn't? David looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw shame in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. Bethany shifted in her seat, her jaw tight. We didn't ask you for everything you gave. I turned to her, meeting her gaze. No, you didn't. But you took it. Every time I offered, you took it. And you never once stopped to think about what it cost me. She looked away, and for a moment there was silence. I reached for the papers in the box, pulling out the loan documents, the receipts, the notes from David. These are not just pieces of paper. These are the years I spent putting you first, even when it meant I went without. I am not asking for everything back, but I am asking for respect, for acknowledgement, for boundaries that protect me too. David swallowed, his hands trembling as he took the papers from me. Flipping through them, seeing the numbers, the dates, the reality of what I had given. Mom, I don't know if we can pay you back right away, he said, his voice small. I'm not asking for it all back now, I said, placing a hand over his. I'm asking for a plan for accountability, for you to see me as more than a safety net you can pull from whenever things get hard. Bethany's eyes were wet, but she blinked, the tears away, her lips tight. We're doing the best we can. I know, I said softly, but so am I. The conversation shifted then, the sharp edges softening as the reality settled in. We talked about a payment plan, small amounts each month to help them learn accountability while ensuring I had enough to live without fear. We talked about visitation, with Elijah setting days where I could see him, take him to the park, spend time with him without feeling like a burden, and for the first time in years, David listened. Bethany remained quiet, but her posture eased, her arms uncrossing as she listened. Perhaps realizing that I wasn't the enemy she had imagined me to be, as they stood to leave, David hugged me, a real hug, not the quick distracted ones I had gotten in recent years. He held on for a moment, and I felt the boy I once held in my arms, the boy who once trusted me to keep him safe. Thank you, Mom, he whispered. I held him tighter. Take care of your family, David, but remember, I'm part of that family too. Bethany nodded, a small, reluctant nod, but it was enough for now. When they left, the house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence of abandonment, but the calm after a storm when the world feels fresh and clean, waiting for what comes next. I sat by the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering on as dusk settled, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and sat with the shoebox, closing the lid, placing it back under my bed. It was no longer a box of regrets or silent sacrifices. It was now a reminder of the strength I had found within myself, of the voice I had reclaimed, of the woman I still was. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfect. There would still be days of hurt, moments of loneliness, but I also knew that I would face them with my head held high, knowing I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my place within my family, because I was no longer the woman waiting by the window, hoping to be remembered. I was the woman who remembered herself, and that, I realized, was enough. The next few weeks felt like learning how to live again. The air was still crisp in the mornings when I stepped outside to check the mail. The ground damp with the memory of rain. The The sun peeked through clouds like shy promises that maybe, just maybe, brighter days were coming. For the first time in years, I wasn't living on standby, waiting for David or Bethany to remember I existed, waiting for the phone to ring for a text, for permission to see my grandson. We had set a day each week for Elijah to visit. It was simple, but to me it was everything. The first Saturday he came, the house felt alive again. I stood by the window, but this time, I wasn't waiting in fear or longing. I was waiting with warmth, with cookies cooling on the counter and hot cocoa and mugs I had set on the kitchen table. When the car pulled up, I saw Elijah's small face in the back seat, eyes wide, pressing his palms to the window. He jumped out before David could fully park, running toward me, his backpack bouncing. "Grandma," he shouted, throwing himself into my arms. I held him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, the warmth of his small body, the trust in the way he hugged me like he never wanted to let go. "Hi, my love," I whispered, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I've missed you." David stood at the porch, hands in his pockets. His eyes met mine, and there was something, their softness maybe, or a guilt he didn't know how to name. "Thanks, Mom," he said. "I'll be back at 5. I nodded, watching him leave, then closing the door and turning to Elijah, who was already slipping off his shoes. "Cookies?" he asked, grinning. Of course I laughed, leading him to the kitchen that day. The house filled with the sound of Elijah's laughter, the scrape of crayons on paper as we colored together, the soft hum of the old radio playing in the background. We baked muffins, the kind with chocolate chips he loved, and he left sticky fingerprints on the counter, his laughter echoing as I chased him around the living room for a few hours. I was not the woman left alone in the storm. I was Grandma, and that was enough. After Elijah left, I sat down with a cup of tea, my heart warm but tired in the best way. I looked around at the scattered crayons, the small shoes by the door, and felt the edges of my loneliness soften. But life, I had learned, has a way of testing you just when you begin to find your footing. One afternoon I received a call from the credit card company. "Mrs. Carter, we're calling to confirm a few charges on your card," the woman said, her voice polite but firm. "I don't have a credit card," I said, confusion tightening in my chest. The woman paused. "This account is in your name, ma'am. We have several recent charges: groceries, gas, some online orders. We just wanted to ensure these are valid." My hands began to tremble as I gripped the phone. "No," I whispered, "they aren't." I spent the rest of the afternoon with the bank, trying to piece together how it had happened. They told me the account had been opened a year ago using my information. With charges slowly accumulating month by month, my mind raced, piecing together memories I had ignored. Bethany asking for my ID for a rebate form, David mentioning how tight things were, the small, uncomfortable moments when conversations about money ended with them brushing me off. The betrayal cut deeper than any storm ever could. That evening, I sat in my chair, the house quiet around me, the air heavy with the weight of the truth. I clutched the statement in my hands, the charges bold and uncaring, evidence of a betrayal I could no longer ignore. For a moment, I let myself cry. Not just for the money, but for the trust broken, for the love that had been twisted into something selfish. Then I wiped my tears and stood up. I called Martha when she answered. I didn't need to explain much. She heard it in my voice. "Come over," she said at her kitchen table. With the hum of the old ceiling fan above us, we called Mr. Henson again. He listened quietly as I explained, his pen scratching against the notepad. "We'll handle this," he said. "This is identity theft, Evelyn. Even if it's family, it's illegal." The word illegal felt heavy, but it was the truth. And for the first time, I wasn't going to run from it. We filed the report with the credit card company and the police. Quietly, carefully. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my safety, my future. When the officer asked if I suspected who it was, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Yes." A few days later, David showed up at my door, his face pale, eyes wide. "Mom, why is there a police report in my name? Why are you doing this to us?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and fear. I let him in, leading him to the kitchen, sitting down across from him. "I didn't do this to you, David," I said calmly. "You and Bethany did this to me," he tried to explain, stumbling over words, saying they were desperate, that they thought they could pay it back, that it was Bethany's idea, that he didn't know how to stop it once it started. I listened, letting him speak, letting the weight of his words settle. "You could have come to me," I said softly, "but you didn't. You took from me without asking, and you lied. You stole from your own mother. I love you, David, but love does not mean accepting betrayal." I explained that the case was in the hands of the authorities now, that I would not withdraw it, that we would handle it legally, fairly, and that he needed to take responsibility. Tears streamed down his face, and for the first time I saw the man he was and the child he still was, wrestling with the consequences of choices he couldn't undo. When he left, the house was quiet again, but this time, it was a quiet I welcomed. I had stood up for myself. I had spoken the truth. I had chosen to protect the woman who had spent her life protecting everyone else. That night, I walked to the window. Looking up at the stars, the cool breeze brushing against my face, I am not invisible. I whispered to the night, I am not weak. I am not alone. Mommy says you're mad, he said, his small voice, careful eyes watching me. I paused, wiping a drip of orange syrup from his chin. I'm not mad at you, sweetheart, I said softly. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and we have to fix them. But I love you, and that will never change. His small hand slipped into mine, and for a moment, the world felt steady again. That evening, after I tucked Elijah into the small bed in the guest room, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, staring at the framed photos on the shelf. Pictures of David as a child, missing teeth and messy hair, birthday cakes and Christmas mornings, all frozen in time before the complexities of adulthood tangled our love and expectations and disappointment. I loved my son. I always would, but I would not let that love be used against me again. The next morning, Mr. Henson called. The investigation is moving forward, he said, his voice calm. Bethany has been contacted regarding the charges. She is denying involvement, but we have evidence of online orders and deliveries in her name. I closed my eyes, the betrayal slicing again, but less sharply this time. The shock had passed. Now it was just the steady ache of reality. What happens now? I asked. There will be a hearing. You may be asked to testify about your financial situation and the impact this has had on you. I nodded, gripping the phone tightly. I'll be there. That evening, as I watered the marigolds Elijah and I had planted, I saw Bethany's car pull up at the curb. She stepped out, her posture stiff, arms crossed, eyes hard. I straightened, setting the watering can down, meeting her gaze calmly. Can we talk? She asked, her voice clipped. I nodded, leading her to the porch. We sat, the tension between us thick, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. She was the first to speak. I can't believe you're doing this, she said, her voice shaking. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear beneath the anger, the desperation behind the coldness. I'm not tearing this family apart, I said softly. You did that when you stole from me. Her eyes flashed, and she opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Don't deny it, Bethany. The evidence is there. I trusted you. I opened my home and my heart to you, and you repaid me by taking what was not yours. She looked away, blinking rapidly. We were drowning, she whispered finally. David wouldn't ask you for more, but we were behind on everything. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed. And did you? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. I took a deep breath, letting the calm settle around me. I am sorry you were struggling, but you made a choice. And now you need to face the consequences of that choice. She wiped at her eyes angrily. You don't understand what it's like trying to keep a family afloat. I felt a small, sad smile touch my lips. No, Bethany, you don't understand. I raised David alone, working 2 jobs, skipping meals so he could eat, patching his clothes when I couldn't afford new ones. I know what it means to struggle. I never took what wasn't mine to make it easier. Silence settled between us, heavy and real. Finally, she stood, her hands trembling. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I met her eyes, but you did. As she left, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. The pain was still there, but it was clearer now, no longer tangled in confusion or guilt. It was the pain of truth, and it was bearable. The following week, I met with Mr. Henson again to finalize changes to my will and financial documents. We ensured my home was protected, that no one could take out loans or cards in my name again. Letters he had written, I love you, Grandma. I pressed the paper to my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks. But this time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope, because even in the messiness of family, even in betrayal, there was still love worth fighting for. That evening, I placed the drawing on the fridge right next to a photo of David as a child, and I whispered to the quiet house, I am enough. I am worthy of respect. I will not be invisible. And as the stars blinked awake in the night sky, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet power, an unbreakable calm, a promise to the woman I had always been, the woman I would continue to be, strong, calm, unshakable. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and clear. The kind of day when the sun shines bright but the chill reminds you to wrap your coat tight around your shoulders. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blue sweater, one that belonged to better days, and a pearl necklace that had been my mother's. It was a reminder. Strength runs in our blood. As I approached the courthouse, my heart fluttered, not from fear but from quiet resolve. This was not just about bills or broken promises. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my place in a family that had tried to push me aside like an unwanted shadow. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and heavy paper. Faces turned toward me, some familiar, others strangers. I took a deep breath, feeling the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat as I walked to the stand. David and Bethany sat together, their faces pale, eyes flickering between guilt and defiance. They looked small, like children caught in a storm. They had tried to hide when the judge called my name. I stood straight, the weight of years of silence lifting with each step. I spoke clearly. Calmly, I told my story, the long nights working 2 jobs so David could have shoes that didn't fall apart. The Christmas mornings when there was barely enough for gifts, but I made magic anyway. The loans I gave out of love and hope. Then I told the truth of the betrayal, the stolen credit card charges, the broken promises, the cold silences, the locked doors. I did not yell. I did not plead. I simply told the truth, and in that truth I found my power. The judge listened quietly, nodding as the evidence was laid bare. In the end, the court ruled to hold Bethany and David responsible for the charges and set a payment plan to repay what had been taken. More importantly, the judge affirmed my right to control my own finances and set clear boundaries for the family. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt the sun on my face and the weight in my chest shift to something lighter. Hope. The weeks that followed were not easy. The family was fractured, some doors closed, but others opened. Elijah still visited, his smile bright as ever. Reminding me why I fought so hard, I joined a local community group for seniors, finding new friends and laughter, new stories to share. That didn't come with pain. Most of all, I learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about respect, love, and the courage to stand up for yourself. One evening, as I sat on my porch, a cool breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine, I looked out at the stars and whispered to myself, I am more than the hurt I endured. I am strength, I am peace, I am enough. And with that, I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of a new beginning, the calm after the storm, the promise of days filled with love and light, on my own terms. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, no matter what storms life brings, you have the power to rise, to heal, and to reclaim your story.